Marshall Plan. It is the largest assistance measure in American history, and it is going directly in the pockets of hardworking taxpayers, their families, and small businesses. For everyone affected by this virus, we will be your voice. For those battling the virus, or lost your job, or do not know if you'll have one a month or two from now, I want you to know we're listening, we hear you, and we are working for you. I want to give Leader McConnell a lot of credit. From the beginning, he was committed to a bottom-up, bipartisan, and bicameral process. He honored his commitment, and it shows. The Senate passed this bill by a unanimous vote. Every Republican, every Democrat. It is bold, truly bipartisan, and targeted to achieve the mission at hand. Our top priority is to keep Americans at work. So we aim the efforts to keep Americans employed through two measures. For small businesses and nonprofits, the bill provides 100% federally guaranteed loans for 8 weeks. If that loan is used to pay your employees, or pay your rent, or pay your utilities, it's no longer a loan, it's a grant, because we know what government has asked you to do. Other business gets a retention credit to keep employees on. If, unfortunately, American workers find themselves out of work, this bill offers an additional 13 weeks of unemployment insurance and dramatically expands eligibility. It also makes benefits more generous by adding another $600 across-the-board payment through the end of July. The CARE Act also expands unemployment insurance to cover gig workers and self-employed and nonprofit employees. Additionally, for American families that might need a little extra support, you will start receiving and seeing those checks in 3 weeks. You won't have to wait for months for financial help. Payments will be as much as $1,200 for an individual taxpayer and $500 per child. Finally, this legislation provides critical resources to American healthcare workers and hospitals. Over $140 billion in appropriations to support our health systems. We don't just talk about our respect for the medical heroes among us. We are going to give them the equipment to save lives and the tools they need to protect themselves. The reason for this legislation is to protect American workers, protect American jobs, and protect hardworking American taxpayers. We are providing targeted, temporary, and timely relief to Main Street, not Wall Street. We are not underwriting bad business practices or priming the pump. Ultimately, we are laying the foundation for a rapid economic recovery. This bill is not only a rescue package, it is a commitment. A commitment that your government and the people whom you elected to serve will do everything we can to limit the harm and hardship you face, both now and in the foreseeable future. To the American public, if you do your part, I promise we will do ours. Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, it is our responsibility to act, to put aside our differences and do what's right for the American public. Aid must be robust, rapid, and resilient, just like its recipients. We are going to help Americans through this. We are going to do this together. And in the end, we are going to be healthier, stronger, and more united than ever before. Because, as Americans, that's who we are. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to Mr. Cohen from Tennessee.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Words above the Speaker's head at the top of this chamber are from Daniel Webster. He says, "May in our day and generation, may we not perform something worthy to be remembered. Today, as we have something worthy before us and something to be remembered, we should all vote aye. I am here to vote aye and to encourage the President to use the Defense Production Act for everyone and to continue talking to the President of China because this is a worldwide pandemic. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Maryland reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized. Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now have the privilege of yielding to the Speaker of the House, who has been so critical in putting this piece of legislation together and focusing on workers and families. I yield to Speaker Nancy Pelosi of California.
The Speaker of the House is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the distinguished Democratic leader, Mr. Hoyer, for yielding and for the manner in which he has enabled so many of our members to participate in this debate today. Thank you, Mr. Hoyer, for your leadership on the legislation and also for leading us today. And I thank Mr. Brady for his leadership as well, for facilitating this conversation. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for keeping us reasonably on time as much as possible for congressional members. Thank you for the strength of your authority as Speaker of Pro Tem today. I thank all of our members for their participation on both sides of the aisle, for the seriousness which we have all taken this important challenge. Mr. Speaker, last week, His Holiness Pope Francis said in his world prayer, he said, "Enlighten those responsible for the common good so that they might know how to care for those entrusted to their responsibility." That is His Holiness's quote. And that is the responsibility that we all have. Today, as we have all acknowledged, our nation faces an economic and health emergency of historic proportions due to the coronavirus pandemic, the worst pandemic in over 100 years. As I proceed with my remarks, I want to say to our colleagues who are watching the proceedings from their chambers in the House to come forward and come to the gallery and listen from here so that when the time comes, we will be prepared to proceed. The distinguished leader on the Republican side, Mr. McCarthy, and Mr. Hoyer have sent a communication to all of you to that effect. But it is very important that you come now. The sooner you come, the shorter my remarks will be. And I want to thank the distinguished leader on the Republican side for his leadership throughout all of this to achieve a bipartisan legislation and to do so as expeditiously as possible in the House, so that the message will be clear to the American people that whatever concerns we may have and whatever we want to do next, right now we're going to pass this legislation. And that is because so many American families have been touched by this crisis. More than 82,000 Americans so far have fallen sick, a number certain to surge as testing goes forward, and which is already the most in the world. We've gone past China and Italy. More than 1,200 Americans have tragically died. Gives you chills just to think of it. Millions of workers are losing their paychecks, including more than, as has been mentioned on both sides of the aisle, 3.2 million Americans who filed for unemployment last week alone, a staggering record-shattering figure. Countless healthcare workers, first responders, and others fighting on the front lines in this crisis are at great personal risk. The American people deserve a government-wide, visionary, evidence-based response to address these threats to their lives and their livelihood, and they need it now. Again, I acknowledge the bipartisanship on which we bring this legislation to the floor. Late Wednesday night, as the leader acknowledged, the Senate unanimously passed legislation which transformed, in our view, since you acknowledged Leader McConnell, I will acknowledge our distinguished chairman on our side, which they transformed a Republican corporate-focused bill into a Democratic workers-first focus. And we salute our chairs that working in a bipartisan way and in a bicameral way across the aisle and across the Capitol, we were able to dramatically expand unemployment insurance and defeated attempts on the Senate side to claw back the $600 per week added benefits that would provide essential relief to the record number of Americans losing their jobs. And I salute Chairman Richie Neal and Bobby Scott for the work that they did on this. I know this is the work of Ways and Means Committee, and successfully achieve full direct payments for workers. This is so important, ensuring that working class American families will be eligible to receive as much as $3,400 for a family of four. I thank again Mr. Neal and Madam Chair of the Financial Services Committee, Maxine Waters, who both of them had bigger proposals, but nonetheless advocating for all of this. And by the way, I would suggest, and instead of saying it's going to take a few weeks for the checks to get there, that the administration electronically transfer those direct payments immediately. We ensured in the bill that any taxpayer dollars given to industry goes first and foremost to workers. Workers' paychecks and benefits not used to pay CEO bonuses, stock fund buybacks, or dividends, and the rest. And I thank, and we have secured robust special oversight that will hold the administration accountable for this. And I thank the distinguished chair of the, where'd he go, Infrastructure and Transportation Committee, Mr. DeFazio, for his leadership in that regard. I will not try to find all of you because you may be in the gallery as we are encouraging members to come. Here we go. And we're also proud, and again, I want to salute Congresswoman Waters for the work for having the oversight provisions in the bill for the account that is going to be spending money out. We're also proud to have secured a truly historic investment of hundreds of billions of dollars in hospitals, health systems, state and local governments, ensuring that they have the tools they need to combat the virus. I salute Chairman Pallone, Chairwoman Lowy of the Appropriations Committee, and Chairwoman DeLauro for making so much of all of that possible. And when we talk about state and local government, I want to express pride in our own Governor, Gavin Newsom. He was on the front line of attacking this, as well as my own Mayor Breed, who has disciplined us to shelter in place. For small businesses, thank you, Congresswoman, Madam Chair Velasquez, and working in a bipartisan way, we want fast relief for those in need, including by securing $10 billion for SBA emergency grants of up to $10,000 and making payroll costs, rent, mortgage interest, and utility costs eligible for SBA loan forgiveness. And for the first time, we have grants from the SBA. And thanks to Secretary Mnuchin, he is facilitating this by not just all of the loans going through the SBA, but going through banks with the SBA imprimatur, which makes this all go much faster. For our students, we paused payments for federal student loan borrowers, paused the payments, and suspended wage garnishment and negative credit reporting during this time. For that and for so many other things relating to our students, I thank Bobby Scott, our chairman of Education and Workforce and Labor. And for our veterans, you heard earlier all of these chairmen make these presentations. For our veterans, we secured nearly $20 billion in funding to improve VA's readiness with equipment, tests, and additional care as again, 571 veterans and 185 employees have now tested positive, and I thank Chairman Takano and others on the committee for their leadership. For our homeowners, renters, and homeless creditors, again, I thank, and consumers, I thank Chairwoman Waters for her leadership there. Since the beginning of this crisis, we have fought to ensure that our nation's response puts families first as we go through this. So the first two bills that we worked in a bipartisan way on were about addressing the emergency. The first bill was about testing, to ensure that everyone in the country would have access to free testing, among other things. It had in there issues that relate to research for a vaccine, research for a cure, but many other things addressing the emergency. In the second bill, which also focused on the emergency, we have mask, and many other provisions focused on the emergency, but taking us to this bill today, which is about mitigation. As our distinguished Mr. DeFazio would say, first we had emergency, then we have mitigation. Doesn't mean we're finished with emergency, but it's moving on to mitigating for some of the economic and health damage caused by this pandemic. Next, we will move to recovery, and hopefully that will be soon. Always, though, addressing the emergency and the mitigation needed. How are we coming, Mr. Leaders? How are we coming with our, our gallery? As we have all said universally, and we say it almost all the time that we come to the floor, no bill is perfect. No bill is perfect. But we want to make sure that at least comes near part of the way to being sufficient. I do think that we should, when we're considering a bill, appreciate for what is in the bill rather than judge it for what is not in the bill. But we do know that we must do more. There's been a constant communication among all of our members, I'm sure on both sides of the aisle, when you're at home or here, with doctors, healthcare providers, laborers, small businesses, nonprofits, faith groups, and scientists on the daily needs and developments in your communities. The on-the-ground reports and clear-eyed thinking we have are essential to crafting our approach to all of this. So again, listening to members on both sides of the aisle and your comments here today, as well as the input that you have been giving in the legislative process, we know that this cannot be our final bill. Yet this bill, again, is I think Bobby Scott called it a down payment. We must advance a fourth bill to address the continued needs. For our fight against the coronavirus, our state and local governments will need vastly more support for preventing, preparing for, and responding to the crisis. Our hospitals and health systems still need vast infusions of funding so they can treat those in need. We must do more. For our healthcare workers, and this has been a current theme on both sides of the aisle, our gratitude for our healthcare workers. They are our heroes. We're thankful and grateful to them. We pray for them. But we need to do more for them than just to say those words. Our frontline healthcare workers, and whether emergency needs, our firefighters, our law enforcement, face a dire lack of medical and personal protective equipment. PPE, personal protective equipment. That's the reference that when you see PPE, that's what it is. We must ensure that the President uses the Defense Production Act to its full extent to provide the tools that we need to combat this crisis. All workers are risking their lives on the front lines of this fight and need stronger OSHA protections to keep them safe. Thank you, Mr. Scott. This week, for example, and you probably all have examples. This week, we learned of the tragic death of Caius Kelly, a nurse manager in New York who died in the line of duty from coronavirus. He and his fellow nurses risked their lives without proper protective equipment because the hospital supply simply did not have enough. Nurses were given a single plastic protective gown to use for an entire shift, when protocol called for a change of gowns between interactions with patients. Other nurses were forced to resort to tying bandanas over their faces in place of proper equipment. And still others even began tying plastic garbage bags around disposable scrubs that they were given in place of proper scrubs for extra protection. As Mr. Kelly's sister said, his death could have been prevented. I'm angry. He was healthy. And now our Nurses, doctors, healthcare workers, and first responders need action. We have to make sure they know that help is not only on the way, but it is a priority for all of us. These people risk their lives trying to save other people's lives, and then they take home what they interacted with in an infected environment, take home. This is just asking far too much. Our families, our workers, our retirees still need more money in their pockets to protect their income security with increased SNAP. One thing we couldn't get in the bill was the 15% increase in food stamps for our children, for our seniors, for those who qualify. Bigger direct payments. I hope that we'll be in agreement. I know that Richie and Maxine had the idea of ongoing direct payments, so bigger direct payments. Pension protections. We had a protection in the legislation. It was supported by everyone. The President of the United States supported it, but Senator McConnell said he would save it for the next bill. So that's why I'm mentioning it, for the next bill. And then we need more expanded family and medical leave. Let me give you an example. Come on, my colleagues, to the gallery. Let me give you an example. If your parent is sick but had ongoing caregiver in the home or went to a senior health center on a daily basis, and because of the virus, that caregiver couldn't come or that health center was closed, you would be able to take family and medical leave. However, as in the case of many members here, if your mom or your dad are healthy and they contract the coronavirus, you would not be able to take family and medical leave. What we would like that to say is for those who cannot care for themselves, it just doesn't make any sense in my view. So in any case, we need that, and without exception. And all Americans need free coronavirus treatment so they don't have to fear the high cost of a hospital stay and others. When we said that the tests were free, it didn't mean that the test is free, but your visit to the doctor is not. And so in the days and weeks to come, Democrats will continue to advance legislation to meet the urgent needs of all affected by the coronavirus. And I keep saying the coronavirus because in this bill, people say, well, how come we didn't do this or that? Because this is specific to the coronavirus challenge that we have. I just want to say a word about our children as I close. So many of our children, I want them, if they're paying attention, distinguished Congresswoman Brooks mentioned the children. We're so sad for them that they cannot be fully engaged in school as they were. Some have access to remote learning and the rest. And this has had a deep impact on American life as it affects our children as well. When I see that some graduations have been canceled, and hopefully not so many more if we can get through this. And I've been, as a mother of 5, grandmother of 9, personally, but officially in my leadership role, I have seen hundreds of thousands of graduates. And what's exciting about it personally and officially is to see the excitement of the families when their child graduates. But when that family happens to have someone on the stage who is the first in the family to graduate, the pride, the joy, the patriotism, all of it is so exuberant, and many of them will be deprived of that experience of seeing that child walk across the stage. So let's try to get this. We had the best minds working 24/7, all hands on deck to find a cure. Let's make sure that we give them the resources they need to do so, but at the same time that we obey the science that says shelter in place or whatever it happens to be. So as we go forward, let us pray. Let us remember what His Holiness told us. What He told us was that we have a responsibility for the common good. So let us prepare for all the loved ones who have lost family members and others who are struggling with the illness now. Let's pray for our heroic healthcare workers and first responders who are risking their lives to care for the sick every day, the men and women in our factories making more medical supplies and personal protective equipment, the farmers, producers, and grocery workers keeping food on the shelves, our truck drivers, postal workers, everybody who is contributing to the effort, and the scientists, as I say, all hands on deck 24/7 for a solution. Congress must show the same courage, same resilience, same strength, and with a great unity and urgency to put families and workers first. Let me again thank everyone who had anything to do with this, and that means almost everybody in this room. Let me thank the Senate Democrats and Leader Schumer for his work, as you acknowledge Leader McConnell. And let us again return to the words of His Holiness Pope Francis. May we enlighten those responsible for the common good so that they may know now to care for those entrusted to their responsibility. With that, I hope we have the biggest possible vote for the American people to show them that Congress's heart and the country's heart is full of love for the American people. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. The gentleman from Maryland reserves, and the gentleman from Texas is recognized. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have no other speakers and prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Thank you,
Gentleman
Leader McCarthy, for your strong and relentless leadership. Thank you for allowing each of us to bring to the table the pro-growth policies that brought about the strongest economy on the planet as we headed into this challenge. Thank to our House leaders, to our ranking members and all the key committees, Representative Grangers and Fox, Representatives Walden, McHenry, Cole, and Shabbat, to each of the members here today who have engaged in this historic agreement, and to the professional teams who have backed us every moment, night and day, in this endeavor. I want to thank our Democratic colleagues for working with us on this bipartisan bill, to our Republican colleagues in the Senate. I especially want to thank Secretary Mnuchin, the point man for President Trump on these negotiations, as well as all of the cabinet, the White House economic team. And I especially want to thank President Trump for his strong and results-oriented leadership at a time of unprecedented crisis for this great country. In times of challenge, I lean on this proverb: fear knocked, faith answered, no one was there. Coronavirus has knocked at America's door, and with it, fear. Faith is answering. We answer with faith in ourselves and our abilities, faith in our free enterprise system, faith in our amazing healthcare system, and yes, faith that when the chips are down, Congress can come together with our president to help hardworking families and businesses when they need it most. We answer that door at this crucial moment with faith in our Creator and faith in our great American spirit. This is the challenge of a lifetime. But if we keep pulling together, if we pass this bill today without delay, we take another step toward that day when we answer the door and fear is no longer there. On behalf of President Trump and the Republican Congress, we urge support for this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Texas yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, as has been said so many times on this floor, America has faced many threats, some in the nature of attack by enemies, some in the nature of natural disasters, whether they be hurricanes or tornadoes or floods. And Americans have responded and overcome those threats. We now have a threat, as some have mentioned, that is unseen, but has a great effect, and is having a great effect today as we debate this bill in America. And today we will vote not as Democrats or Republicans, but we will vote as Americans who've been sent here to represent our country and our people, to promote the general welfare. Certainly the general welfare has been put at risk by this virus. We have, in a very short time, passed 3 major pieces of legislation, 2 that generated in this House, 1 generated in the Senate. And we will pass this bill today. I want to thank the majority leader. Excuse me, the minority leader. I'm the majority leader, right? You can't have it. And while we enjoy a little levity, we understand the gravity of this situation. People will die today as a result of this virus. And we have come together as Democrats and Republicans from every region of this country to respond in a way sufficient for the challenge. And we know we'll need to do more. But this day, let us hope that, like the United States Senate, we come together, each and every one of us, not for partisan advantage, but for the advantage and defense of our people. America has been blessed by God and by our people. Let us respond this hour to their need in their defense so that America will go forward stronger and better and more ready to face future challenges. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 911, the previous question is ordered on the motion. The question is on adoption of the motion. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purposes, gentlemen, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I came here to make sure our republic doesn't die by unanimous consent in an empty chamber, and I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise and remain standing until counted. An insufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is refused.
Mr. Speaker.
Is the gentleman recognized?
I object on the basis that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
The chair will count for a quorum. Counted for a quorum is present. The motion is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Pursuant to Section 7B of House Resolution 891, the House stands adjourned until 3 p.m. on Tuesday, March 31st, 2020.